This episode is brought to you by Persona. The best fintechs expand what's possible for users. Persona does that for fraud prevention. Their recently upgraded link analysis tool surfaces connections in real time, letting you spot deepfakes, identity farms, and fraud rings during onboarding and investigations. They just published their Fraud Leader's Guide to Link Analysis, a practical look at today's top risk signals, automating decisions, and scaling link analysis for fraud prevention. Download it now at withpersona.com/FTT-fraud. Hello, and welcome back to the Fintech Takes podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different. You might know this about me, but before getting into content creation, I actually spent a long time, the beginning of my career, working in B2B marketing, specifically in fintech and financial services. And despite my new role, writing a newsletter and doing a podcast, I've always had a soft spot for B2B marketing and the B2B marketers who do that work. It's a tough job. And it's something that I think as a discipline has changed a lot over the last 20 years that I've been doing it, and particularly in the last couple of years as AI has come on the scene. So I wanted to do an episode focused on just how B2B marketing works, and in particular, why it doesn't always work as well as it could. So the theme of this episode is B2B marketing sucks, but it doesn't have to. And to figure out why B2B marketing sucks and how it can be better, I wanted to have a bunch of different folks on this episode to basically talk out their experiences working in marketing, in fintech, in financial services, trying to reach business buyers, trying to influence business buyers, and get their observations about why it's hard, why it doesn't work well, what we could be doing better, what they've done that works extremely well, how they are navigating all the changes that are happening in marketing thanks to AI, and what some of the new tools and capabilities are that are being built to help B2B marketers be more successful. So we have a bunch of different segments in today's episode. The first segment was really, really fun and pretty long. It was with two of my very good friends from the world of fintech content creation, Koki Hasiostis, who is the head of vertical marketing at Secure and creator of a great new newsletter called For the Plot, a newsletter on marketing, branding, and PR in a post-AI world, and Julie Verhage Greenberg, who is the founder of Quinnovation and formerly a co-founder and writer of Fintech Today and a reporter at Bloomberg. Julie and Koki have known each other forever. Funnily enough, I tried to schedule separate interviews to do two different segments, one with Koki and one with Julie. Those ended up getting scheduled back to back. And then they found out that they were scheduled back to back and insisted that we make it one big combined interview, which I was very glad that they did because as great as they are individually, it was so much more fun to talk as a group, the three of us, about why B2B marketing sucks, the challenges that founders have in telling their own stories, the role that great B2B marketing can have in shaping a better story, how to navigate the challenges of marketing in the era of AI, and a lot more. Action-packed segment. There'll be a couple segments up after this one, but for now, please enjoy Koki and Julie. This is Fintech Takes, the podcast keeping you in the loop on all the latest fintech trends, news, and ideas. I'm Alex Johnson, creator of the Fintech Takes newsletter, your host and self-confessed fintech nerd. Let's go. Okay, well, this was originally supposed to be two different segments with two awesome guests, but then as I figured might happen, these two guests who've worked together for a very long time and know each other very well found out they were coming on the podcast just coincidentally back to back, and now we're doing a combined session. Julie, Koki, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us. We prefer to work as one. It's like a hive mind situation with us.
I have it in my contract. I don't do anything without Koki. So.
Okay, I mean, it's good to know. It's good to know because I didn't go through your agents before I booked you on the show, but if I had, I would have found out that you just don't do
in the
things
future,
separately.
Alex, my agent is Colton Pond. Can you work through him? That'd be great.
I will do my best.
Thank you.
Colton owes me many things, so at least he can forgive me on. Okay, good. So we know that it's all going to work out just fine. the focus of this episode is B2B marketing, and in particular, sort of channeling Koki here, I want to talk about why B2B marketing sucks and how it perhaps could be better. And it's interesting, actually, because I think all three of us have, at various times, worked as both content creators and also B2B marketers. So we've sat on both sides of the fence, and I think have seen things that have worked well. I think we've seen lots of things that haven't worked as well. And so I want to talk about just what you've observed over the course of your career about B2B marketing and, Koki, working off of your wonderful newsletter, which we will drop a link to in the show notes. I wanted to start by talking about B2B marketing's boring problem, because a lot of B2B marketing is just so dry and boring that it feels like it's from a different universe than B2C marketing, which is funny because despite the fact that one is B2B and one is B2C, fundamentally, it's still like humans communicating with other humans. Oh, yeah. And yet somehow, like in a B2B context, we forget that like a human being has to pick this up, read about it, care, listen, engage. Like it's the same people on the other side. It's not like robots listening to this or making, buying or procurement decisions. So Koki, I want to start with you. Like, why does B2B marketing have a boring problem?
It's okay. First of all, I just want to take a look at my life for a second here. I get to be on a podcast with my two favorite people where I'm being encouraged to complain for an hour.
Yes.
This is like the highlight of my existence. I don't think it gets better than this. This is the end of my career. I retire after today.
Excellent. I'll tell Colton.
Yeah, please do. Someone ought to. It's so boring. And your point, that's the whole thing, right? Like 80% of decisions are made emotionally. Everything else we do is rational error cover. Every single other thing we do. And a marketing's job is solely to make you feel something. We have no other job. There's like the only thing that converts is emotion, right? And then somehow, the second we're faced with like, we need to talk like a business and be a business, we get not just super boring, but like we're almost speaking in tongues. Like instead of just saying the thing we mean, we end up saying like all this extraneous crap. And like, I can't figure out what I'm supposed to think about anything when it's presented to me in that context. And it all's like very, what I'm talking about, like a very specific businessy writing where it's like, oh yes, we're going to say leverage a lot and synergy.
I was just going to say,
what does any of this mean?
Enable, empower. Like we could probably rattle off like a dictionary of like B2B business
words
terms
that make me physically sick. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because and Julie, I want to get your perspective on this. Like when I started writing in like a B2B marketing context, I basically learned that there were words you could say that would make you sound more like authoritative or smart.
Robust.
Or like, yeah. Like there are these words that you could say that were like magic words where it's like, I don't really know what this means. They don't really know what this means, but we've all just sort of agreed to accept that like, this is like the lingua franca of how like B2B marketing works. And I mean, Julie, you have a slightly different background because you, I think, started off more on the reporter side, but like, it's the same thing, right? Like there's a common language and structure you're supposed to follow. And if you do, no one gets in trouble.
Yeah, see, I think maybe it's because of my reporter background. Maybe it's because I'm friends with Koki, but I kind of like tried to avoid those words and things and like actually make it sound more human and being kind of like funny in the post and stuff. It's also, I have a job ghostwriting for people because B2B marketing is so bad. So you have to make it so like the CEOs, founders, whoever, their content isn't bad, even though their company content often sucks.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk about that actually because one of the barriers, I think, to great B2B marketing is that, you're working with a company, and Julie, you do this every day, and you get connected with someone at the company who's like brilliant, right? Like they work in the trenches of this problem. They understand it really well. They talk to customers all the time. Like, and you're talking with them, and you're like, this is amazing. And then you're like, oh, hey, so like, maybe you should write a blog post or whatever. I remember doing this a lot when I worked in marketing where I was like trying to like get executives or operators from companies I worked at to be like, hey, we need content. Like, could you like write a blog or go on a podcast or whatever? And it was so foreign to them. I mean, you would have thought like, I remember talking to an executive who would like routinely meet with like the CEOs of the largest banks in the country. And I was like, hey, like, what if you wrote a thing? And they were like, a blank piece of paper. I couldn't possibly face down a blank piece of paper and create content. So it feels like one of the biggest barriers to start with is just like content creation for people who don't do it on a regular basis is a huge lift. And I feel like that's one of the things, Julie, that drives such a robust market for ghostwriting is just like the mechanical lift of like creating content on a consistent basis. It's hard if you've never done it.
Yeah, I would say lots of times it ends up being, there's some executives that love just like sending a bunch of notes over. Cause like if you tell them just like write up notes or whatever, then that's fine.
Sure.
Or a voice memo, that also has worked. But I have seen it shift probably in the last like 3 to 6 months where they'll use AI and put a bunch of notes and stuff into there and do some prompts and then send it to me. And it's like, 50 to 60% of the way there. I gotta go tweak some things and like, usually it's changing the headline and the intro and fixing words that like, of course they wouldn't say and things like that. But that actually is, it's making it so people are more, they don't instantly like cringe when you ask them to write something, like take anything like that. Whereas before it's like, it's just my KPIs aren't measured on that. And like, this is going to take so much time away. Like, it's really worth it. And now it's like, well, it's a lot easier to do something like that. So I don't get as much pushback anymore, which is really nice.
That is good. I mean, I do feel like the AI has sort of become an on-ramp for that blank piece of paper problem a bit, because that's terrifying, honestly, to a lot of people who don't write on a regular basis. I mean, I'm still scared of a blank piece of paper when I'm like sitting down. I'm like, oh God.
Oh no, you're not.
I hate myself. No, really, truly. Like I feel like you get used to it. You get used to the fear and you sort of can like push past it. But like every time I sit down with a blank piece of paper, I'm like, this is not going to make sense. I'm an idiot. Like it's a very intimidating experience. So I do think AI as an on-ramp to get past that initial fear is useful. But then Koki, the flip side is AI just magnifies we all are talking the same language, using the same words like empower and leverage and synergy. Like that's what AI was built for, was to magnify that problem.
AI was built to magnify anything, right?
Yeah.
Like AI's real skill is not like creation. It's like multiplying. It's a multiplier. That's what it does. It's a force multiplier. So it's like it can take your absolute crap and make more crap. That's fine. Equally, it can take something good and give you something good enough with some tailoring. I also think people forget about the tailoring element. Like, go back, edit it, argue with it, literally defend your position, make sure it gets what you're trying to get to. And then
It never
no
does
M
have one
dashes.
prompt and then no edits afterwards.
Yeah.
That's guaranteed AI shit on the internet, and people are going to know right away.
No, well, and I mean it's funny because the more sort of AI initial output you read, the easier I think it is for everyone to sort of recognize like that's AI, like that's how AI talks, that's how it reasons, that's how it thinks. And like the easy one is like go back and edit out all the M dashes, but like it's hard for me. Like I use M dashes. I was using M dashes. Don't
get me started.
AI
it has ruined my whole life.
It's horrible. I love M dashes.
If I have to use a semicolon, I feel like that's a personal attack on me.
Right.
I hate semicolons. I don't want to use that, but now what options do I have?
That's the only other thing you can
you gotta
replace
like make
with.
it 2 sentences or change
two sentences. I'm lucky. I grew up and went to this school, and my high school was like insane for English and writing, like insane. I think you can tell because I'm very flowery.
I was going to say that
but
that does vibe with you, yeah.
It adds up, but like we got like abused with the comma, so I know how to use way too many commas, and I abuse that now. But like the M dash used to make it very clear, make it very easy to create a thought. Anyway, I'm very upset about this.
No, it was such like an elegant, wonderful way of like, it was a tool I used in the toolbox a lot, and now AI has ruined it. Thank you, AI. The other thing, Koki, that you wrote about in your newsletter when you were talking about why B2B content sucks so much is the difference between appearing useful and being useful.
And this drives me crazy.
I want to dig into that because I thought that was a really good way to articulate like the difference. I mean, like Twitter is the worst. I try to stay off as much as I can because it's like just overrun. LinkedIn is the same. Like it's overrun with like things trying to appear useful. But this idea that like, I mean, and it's a very particular kind of slop because it's like, I would like to offer a thought that might be useful to someone else, but it's like laundered through this like complex like mental mechanism where it ends up being this thing that doesn't take a position. It doesn't say anything controversial. It doesn't say anything that anyone would disagree with. It doesn't like offer, it doesn't take any risks, I guess is what I notice about it. And what I've found, and I'm sure both of you have sort of experienced the same, is like the content that resonates with people are the ones where like you are sort of staking out a very unusual or sort of risky position. And, you know, you might come back the next day and go, you know what, I've thought about it and I got feedback from people and I think I was 100% wrong and here's why. And like this slop sort of appearing useful but not being useful content, there's no like risk or opinion ventured at all. Like what have you observed about reading all of this slop that sort of like, why do people fall into this trap? Obviously AI makes it worse and makes it easier to fall into it, but people were falling into this trap before AI too. What is this appearing useful trap?
I think it's the nature of the marketing org itself. I think the marketing org is fundamentally set up to fail in a lot of ways. And like some unfixable ways and some that are like we could tailor. So I have this whole, I think we kind of alluded to it, but I have this whole thing on the head of content. The head of content is a brutal job to hire for because it's like their mortgage is dependent on useful content and any risk, anything perceived as risk impacts their bottom line. Like it impacts their home life. Like it could impact their children, right? So of course you're not going to put anything on the line. So step one is like that hire is often somebody who got a degree in English or journalism, like did something for a few years, realized they wanted to make money and came to a tech company to be head of content, right?
Yep.
Present company excluded. The way to actually hire this is to do it one of two ways, right? It's to take somebody internally and make them the content person without that actually being their real job. So it's someone internally who like really knows the product, really is locked in, right? You said earlier, like these really brilliant people who are like terrified of the blank page, help give them someone to build the structure by which they can like become something of a voice box, right? The other way to do this is to hire someone who has literally no interest in whether they live or die at the company. Other than their own like, oh, it'd be nice to do well here.
Yeah.
So this is where someone like Julie makes sense, right? Like if Julie were to leave any job today at all, it wouldn't matter. She's still Julie. She already had the reputation. She already had the voice. She already had the credibility, and she already had the respect of the industry, right? Like, so it's actually, I talk about this in one of my newsletters. Like Simon Taylor is actually the perfect example of this. What he did for Soups at Sardine, what he's doing at Tempo now, that's exactly right. Like Simon doesn't have to fear being fired because he's already proved his value outside.
Right.
Which means that he can actually create things that are interesting and engaging. That's kind of where I'm at. And like, I have more to say on the modern marketing org, so I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah, go.
The other thing here is like a lot of marketing orgs are set up for motion over movement today. What I mean by that is like, just get shots on the board. And I actually tend to agree with that as like a thing that we should be doing. And Colton's belief here, and he's spoken about this widely, is like, get points on the board and tie everything to revenue or else nothing matters at all. I'm with him on that, but we can get lost in the sauce on too. Like he's very like, you know, he's very like, I'm going to do things and things are going to move, and he's right and he does and he's incredible.
Totally.
Equally, we can get like we get lost in the sauce on output, and it ends up kind of looking like you're proving you're doing something versus actually making an impact. So you end up with like super output heavy, right? That's just, it's not actually moving the needle. It's not actually changing anything or the way that we think about the brand or whatever.
Well, and to add to that, because I think it's a really good point, it's like so many of that like head of content person's job, like they're measured on how many blog posts did you publish this quarter? And it's like, that's a terrible metric. Like the metric, and it's the reason this is hard is because it's hard to measure these things, but like what we're actually aiming for is, did you change anyone's mind over the last 6 months? And like, this is a small industry. If you changed one person's mind, that probably pays for all the work it took to do that, right? Like, so there's this element of content marketing, the value you actually want out of it is this very asymmetric, did you influence a very small number of people to think in a slightly different way? But that's really hard to measure. It's really hard to do. And it takes like sustained effort over time. And going back to something you were saying earlier, Koki, I mean, the thing about like the sort of process versus results thing, and Simon's a good example of this, Julie's a good example of this, you're a good example of this. Like part of the thing is also, you kind of need to be embarrassed if you put out something bad or cringy. Like, I don't want my peers in the industry to judge this. And so I'm going to go back and work harder on this. Like, I can't tell you the number of times.
I also think with content, like you have to feel the cringe. So I think about this a lot. Like with content, a lot of people get put off. You were saying earlier, it's a blank page, but it's this other thing too. It's like, it feels cringy to create content because you just don't want to be that guy in your friend group that like your real friends in the real world are like, oh God, there's Alex again. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Well, it's embarrassing. Like when I tell people in the real world I have a podcast, they're like, really? And you're like, yeah, but like, it's okay.
Are you sure?
Are you okay?
Yeah. I think that as in the parlance of the kids, you have to embrace the cringe to be truly based.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to really lean into it. Like,
I didn't know we had someone from Gen Z on the podcast. That's fantastic, Koki. Well done.
It's just my face is very young. Sponsored by my doctor. Hello.
There you go.
I just think like there's this other element too, like where there's this cringe factor that I actually think is very powerful and very good. And being wrong. You talked about that earlier too. Be wrong publicly, constantly.
Well, I mean, and Julie, like the other thing I think that ties into this, and this goes back to the ghostwriting thing too, is a lot of companies would prefer to publish content published by the company, right? So it's like, here's a blog post. You always see this with like the byline, right? Like we published a blog and the blog was written by company. And you're like, okay, was it though? It wasn't. It was written by a person. And there's this tension, I think, between developing content and a brand that accrues to an individual versus to a company. And I think that tension is really interesting because like, if it goes to the company, obviously in some ways that's good for the company, right? Like if this person leaves, we're not screwed. It allows us to sort of share many different perspectives, all sort of blended together under the company's headline. But at the same time, if you publish stuff like under the company, it doesn't feel personal. It doesn't have any opinion. It doesn't give someone to like follow. And I think to this point we've been making, it doesn't create like any accountability. Like if the company publishes it, like who do I yell at or disagree with or send an email to? Like there is no like accountability. So how, like in your experience, how do companies sort of balance, should this content be published under a person's name? If so, who? Should it just be our company blog and we just publish every month? Like what's the balance there?
Well, do people really pay that much attention to what the byline is on there?
I don't know.
I do more on like a tech blog or a case study maybe. Tech blog,
I think so.
It's like diving into things. I never look at who writes it. Some people
like,
might
on social though, don't you? Like
on social,
yeah.
I mean, like on a blog post, I never look at the byline unless it's like a tech blog that I'm kind of curious. Like, okay, like how long has this person been in this role, or I don't know, something like that.
Well, let me ask you this question though, because I think the flip side to that is when I'm reading like a blog post or anything published by a company, I sort of am like in two different minds as I'm starting to read it. And then I sort of settle into one or another, which is, does this sound like it was written by an individual or does this sound like it was written by a company? And obviously, like if it sounds like it was written by a company, it was still written by an individual human, but like all the humanness has been sanded off of it. And I think to your point, I know lots of fintech companies that are great at B2B marketing. And one of the things they do really well is even when they publish a blog post under the company.
List them.
I'll give. I actually wanted to ask you about that.
List them.
Don't. No, you can't say so cure. That's cheating.
Okay,
well, like,
so here's the one I say.
Yeah, you can say that one. Like I've been doing some research into Ramp recently, and one of the things I think Ramp does really well, among others, is like everything they publish feels like it was written by a human, and like the word choice and everything
Stripe
just feels,
does a really good job too.
Stripe does a great job. Like there's a set of companies.
I disagree on Stripe. Sorry, that's my unpopular opinion.
They don't do a good job on all of it, but I think like the Stripe sessions is really good, and then their Reddit presence is really good.
And obviously the dev docs were like kind of the whole thing forever, right? Like that was the thing.
Yeah, maybe they're more developer oriented. Maybe for people not in the developer
really like
community,
their tech
they
blog.
don't. Okay, that's
a very good tech blog. But I was like, whenever with companies that I work with, I tend to have it where the person's on there. The only time I want it is if it's like kind of a one-off, and then if like their WordPress doesn't have it where you can add in just a random name instead, and then you just say company or put my name on it or something. But most of the time, like if the founder wrote it or I wrote it or someone else at the team wrote it that writes a fair amount, I put their name on it.
Yeah. I think that makes sense because I just think like that sort of seems directionally where people want to go and what they're looking for. The other thing that I wanted to ask you both about is, and Koki, you wrote about this in your newsletter. I'm trying to think of a not horribly mean way of saying this, but
just say it in whatever bitchy way I obviously said it. Because we can assume whatever I said was worse than what's going to come out of your mouth.
I'll give you the slightly nicer version. Founders are terrible at telling their own story.
Yeah,
They're
they are
terrible at it. And
you know who is particularly bad at it? This guy.
That one right there.
I was real bad, head to toe at it.
So explain why, because I run into founders all the time. I spend a ton of time talking to them, and they'll kind of like tell you the story, or they'll kind of like position themselves and their story in the overall framework of like a narrative and a plot, and like trying to get you to care about it. And I frequently will tell founders and companies this when I'm sort of reviewing what they've written or what they're trying to get me to write about when they send me like a press release or whatever. And it's like, I'm not your mom. And so while she is probably very proud of you for this specific thing, I don't care at all. And it's so funny to me the number of times that I get a story from a founder or a company where it would work really well if the audience was their mom and they're proud of everything they do. But if it's not them, no one is going to care. And then you kind of push on it. And you're like, well, but like, what about this? Or why this? And you can push them to get to a version of the story that has more sort of broad narrative interest in a plot and that actually is interesting. Because most of what's getting built in the space is interesting and does have a story attached to it. But they seem utterly unable to like divorce their own personal experience building the company from the narrative that's going to resonate in the market. Like, why does that happen?
Okay, so there's three things here. The first is the two in the weeds problem, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just two in it. You can't zoom out. You're like, oh, but this. It's why the hardest part, in my opinion, of being a founder, an early stage founder, I will clarify. The hardest part for me of being an early stage founder was the one-liner. What does the company do?
Yeah.
Because I had to zoom out, and it was so hard to zoom out when you're like, I mean, in the case of Twally for me, right? We invented something that did not exist before. First of all, you're wrapped up in that. Your ego's wrapped up in that. But then you're like so deep in it, like all the different moving pieces of what it does and what it could do.
Yeah.
It's really hard to just back up and be like, hey, this is a trustless hiring software that works on a blockchain. Like really hard to just zoom out. And then you come out with something like that and you're like, that's not even very good. Do you see what I mean? To this day, I'm still not very good.
There were some buzzwords in there. Yeah.
Yeah, you like those? Yeah, those ones are in the house.
And maybe just to add a point in there, there's a difference between the one-liner for VCs, which is like, how many buzzwords can I jam into one sentence?
We're
versus,
one of three. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one, you're two in it. Number two is that the VC story you tell, the founding story you tell to a VC is inherently different and needs to be. For most founders, and I've done a lot of fundraising coaching. Obviously, I live with the fundraising coach in fintech and basically every industry. You should go talk to him.
Yeah.
His name's Matt. He's a pain in the ass. But he, like, when you tell a VC, like, this is how I came to found the company, you need to make it sound inevitable. And that's really good storytelling in that room. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, I actually worked at Boston Consulting Group, and then I started my own consultancy out of spite after getting fired from a smaller consultancy, stole other clients, and changed my financial situation forever. So I started a platform that people could consult more easily, trustlessly, safely, and paid well, all through the internet. Inevitable. Which, for those of you listening, that is the story. And then there's this third thing where they try to take the VC inevitability story, which again, by the way, very good for fundraising.
Yeah.
And they try to implant it as like a larger thing that they're like doing out loud. And it often comes off as the extremely performative LinkedIn post. I don't have to name names. You know who I'm talking about. There are a number of beloved founders in our industry who tell these founder stories that make you want to lay in traffic and scream at a hapless God, because you're like, I deserve better than to have my eyes touch this. And the problem with it is this element of like, I am performing hard work. I am performing all these things. I'm performing an interest in something that didn't exist. I always make the joke, like, when I was 5, I noticed a big problem of SMB loan onboarding and origination.
Right.
And you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. So there's this performative element of like, how are we performing fortune falling our way while also ignoring the big part of it, which is luck and timing.
Totally.
Like, there's a level of humility that it doesn't necessarily nestle there comfortably. So it's like, it's kind of missing, and you end up with this like this kind of stuff that Matt and I read it back and forth to each other just to keep each other entertained. Like, some people read love poems. Matt and I read really, really bad LinkedIn content to each other all the time.
Romantic.
It keeps the love alive. It's, it's tough out there.
Yeah.
But we read it back and forth to each other all the time, and it always has the exact same texture, quality. Like, it's almost like this sound of when you tap your nails on something that looks like it's going to be metal but isn't.
Mm.
And it almost caves underneath you. Like, it's like there's this same experience of like this. It has no backing. It has no backbone. It has no. It has no formidability.
Yeah.
It just is, and it's terrible, and it makes me physically ill. Not to be dramatic.
No. I mean, to add to your point, I mean, one of the things that I always notice is in the room with the VCs, you pitch the inevitability and the sort of like, this is going to be a great business story. And then when you take that story out of the boardroom with the VCs and you tell it to the market, you sand off the business part because it doesn't sound good, because it sounds greedy. And you sort of reframe it as like, this is really important for society. And like, I think that founders, when they make that transition in the story, they think like, oh, like, this is going to be great. Like, we're going to go, make the world a better place by, my favorite example that drove me crazy was like a founder who was building a different type of mortgage product to allow other founders who had lots of money tied up in equity to be able to get a mortgage so they could buy a $3 million house in San Francisco. But they were trying to follow the same playbook of like representing that idea as somehow like good for the world overall. And it's like, you don't need to do that. And if you try to do that, you're going to come off looking horribly. Like, it just doesn't work. I mean, Julie, both as a reporter and
I'm annoyed that I just didn't think about this. I'm annoyed that you just made the exact point that's been bothering me the whole time, and I didn't think of it because I'm so like obsessive about this stuff. That's literally it. That's the whole thing. We keep trying to frame things and I'm good for the world when really capitalism is fine. We're all pretty comfortable with it at this point.
Right. Well, it's like you could just say, hey, we think this part of how this process sucks and it's making human beings' lives miserable for no reason. So we're going to fix it. And if it turns into a good business, great. If not, I'm kind of obsessed with it, so I'm going to fix it anyway. Like, that would be such a breath of fresh air.
I'm literally
if someone
locked
would tell me
in.
that.
Like, this is just something I deeply care about. Like, fuck I'd be so locked in.
Like, I just am going to fix this. It doesn't really matter. Like, I like, to your point about like humility, I like when you talk to founders in like a social setting and you're asking them about like what they're doing. And they're like, oh yeah, we're doing this. It's fine. Like it shows that they have a sense of humility and an understanding of where they fit in the broader world. And God, I just don't get that.
And also that the story is not linear. Like, again, the VC story has to be linear.
It has to be like
the
this
actual
happened
good
so that
public
this
story.
could happen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When you do that in the actual public story, it all feels inauthentic. It feels hollow. It feels like
totally
very faux. It just doesn't work. It really drives me crazy because it's like, can't we? Like, the point of the story is that it's not linear. The point of the story is that there was struggle. There were days where you were like, oh, this is our last day. There were days where you were like, okay, I'm making a list of the 5 people I have to lay off because if we're going to make it to next year, that's the only option I have. Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of like
Julie
honesty. Yeah, I mean, Julie, you get these press releases a lot, or you have over time, like of, hey, here's our story. This is so great. Like, how do you react when you get these kind of stories we're describing?
That, like, when I was a reporter, the press release was always just like a cheat sheet for me. So I just needed like the basics down on there. And then you got more of the actual story from talking to the founders and stuff. Because the rest of the press release was just BS.
Yeah, sure.
So I would just look at like, okay, like here's how much they were raising, or this is what the new product's called. Here's when the company was founded. Like, here's how to spell and make sure I got the founder's name right and stuff like that. I was like, going back to the point on telling the story, one thing that's really hard, both on that and sometimes doing social and blogs for companies is, and this is like the biggest red flag for me, I end up leaving within a month or two after this, is like if they think they can do your job better than you. It's like, well, why are you paying so much per hour for me to try to tell you that you need to do this a different way? And like, here's the way I'm taking it, when like I'm the, like, you clearly don't think I'm an expert then if you think you can write this better, then just write it yourself, you know? That's one of the biggest things. And I think that's one of the founder challenges is they think that they can tell it better than anybody, when in reality they can give you all the details, but it's better to have someone else kind of like paint that full picture, because like Koki said, it ends up being like a story that your mom will love. But
by the way, my mom never loved our founding stories. So this is like, I'm like, wow, it was, my mom didn't even care. That's how you know, like I was
that was
crashing and burning.
You were way out on the edge.
She was like, oh, this is not good.
It is a good point, Julie, about like, the other thing that kind of drives me crazy about B2B marketing is, and I feel bad actually for like CMOs or other, because you see people like leave jobs, right? It's like, oh, the CMO left or they got fired or whatever. And it's like, a lot of times there are these very unrealistic expectations for B2B marketing, I feel like, where it's like, oh, well, I could do this just as well as you could. I could write this thing. Why am I paying so much money for this? Like there's this very, it doesn't exist for other parts of business, right? Like I don't sit over a programmer's shoulder and be like, you know, I would have done it this way, not that way. Like that doesn't happen in most other parts of work. But for whatever reason, marketing, because we all have experience writing stuff and picking out colors and coming up with names, like it's a very human discipline in some ways. And so I think that leads executives or founders to like be very impatient with marketers and to not give them enough like trust and autonomy and budget and time sometimes too, right? Like the other thing with a lot of this is, and Julie, I wanted to ask you specifically about podcasts, because this is another area where I see this. It's like, hey, we're going to do a podcast. And whenever I hear a company say, hey, we're going to do a podcast, I'm like, great. Are you prepared to do 5,000 episodes? Because if you're not, you're probably not going to have a sustained project that's going to actually have the effect you want. If you just want to do like 3 episodes and then you're going to run out of ideas or momentum or enthusiasm for this project, just don't do it. Like this is a long-term
that's not a podcast.
endeavor.
That's like a webinar series. That's
totally.
Not
Totally. And like, but it's like in your head, you think, I want to do a podcast, or I want to start a blog, or I want to be active on social. And it's like, you are signing up for a long-term commitment to try to influence how people in your industry think about this topic. That is not something that you throw $10,000 at and then stop. It's not something that you spend a week on and then move on to other things. Like it is a long-term commitment. And God, I mean, people just don't think about B2B marketing as a long-term initiative. They think about it in terms of like, I want to throw money at this and have it just solve my problem.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes they just want to have one. It's like, well, who's your audience? Like, do they want to listen to 5,000 episodes from you? Or are they going to get sick of it? Are you willing to throw extra money on it, like a set and different gear? Like, are the people that you want to do it, do they have enough time to actually do it? Or is their schedule crazy, like someone like Colton, where like it would be so hard to schedule with Colton and with somebody else, because like, you know, the people that you're probably trying to get on the podcast are also probably people with very busy schedules.
They're super busy.
So there's just so many different dynamics to a podcast versus doing something like a webinar, a blog post, a short video for social, or something like that. I'm not opposed to someone doing like a quick series, but again, that's more of like a webinar. I wouldn't necessarily pitch that as a podcast. You could turn it into just audio as well if someone wanted to just listen to it that way. But again, that's just like a short series, not necessarily like, hey, we're launching a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, and at Koki, I mean, one thing Julie mentioned that I definitely see a lot is they just want this because they want it. And there's a real like sort of like
doing for doing.
Well, and there's like a measuring with your peers thing. Like they have a podcast, I need to have a podcast, or they're doing these great things on social, I need to do that. And it's like, okay, have you examined your feelings? Have you looked inward and sort of realized like why
take it to therapy?
This? Yeah, because like there is a certain amount of like you know, you should be in therapy rather than like hiring someone to help you build a podcast. Like these
Go to
are
church.
not
Do a solid favor.
like maybe this won't fill the hole that you're trying to fill in this way. So I do think there is an element of that. All right. let's do lightning round real fast.
Woo, fun.
Dang.
Okay, so I have a couple questions for each of you. First one is, we've already kind of touched on this, but I'm very curious. You both create a ton of content. I create a ton of content. Let's just be honest for a second. How do you use AI to help you do that? And how do you very explicitly not use AI? Like, where do you draw the lines?
I use it so I don't have a blank template anymore.
Okay.
I'll like throw a bunch of notes in there and have it get me started. That's my biggest thing. Because even when I was a reporter, I'm just like you, where the blank page is what scares me. Once
Yeah,
I've
you're kinda
got
freaked
something
out.
started, I can go in and do a bunch of different things. I would also say I work with a bunch of different companies, so I'll have different projects in Claude. And that project will kind of get tailored to what that company tends to like. And that ends up when I put my notes in there, whatever, the template that it sends me and the notes that it gives back are, tailored to that company, and it gives it, that slight edge where I have less editing I have to do.
Got it. That's a good
I
one.
always have to edit it, but it makes it so I'm not starting from a blank page, and that's so nice.
What's a thing you have explicitly said I'm not going to use AI for because it crosses some line in terms of the quality of the project or just your own skill set? Like, what's the thing you refuse to use AI for?
I would say it goes back to what we talked about earlier, where like you're using AI and then not doing a bunch of editing to it.
Right.
You
So you'll
have to.
never put something in and just copy it out of AI and drop it in to publish. Okay. That seems like a very good rule. Koki, how about you?
I've written about this and I get asked this a lot because, as you can see, I produce a lot of work every week and I write it in my personal humble opinion beautifully. And people are like, that must be AI. I'm like, no, AI could never. AI does not have my je ne sais quoi. You know what I mean?
I agree.
But it does have a lot that I love. So the way that I work with AI is pretty systematic. I basically go back and forth with it a lot. Give me the idea. Okay, give me 5 ideas. Great. Okay. I like this one. Let's dig in. No, that's not my opinion. No, I do not agree with you. No, I do not like that. And just back and back and back and forth on the idea. Then I'm like, give me a draft. Then no M dashes. And then, and then I'm like, change this section. This is a better example here. I like this a lot. Can we bring this in? And then I have it give me a draft. And then I copy the draft into docs. And then I rewrite it line by line in my own voice.
Yeah.
So it's like giving me what Julie says. It gives me the notes essentially, but it really helps me be able to sit down and actually do the thing I'm great at, which is I am a beautiful writer. What I suck at, or not suck, but it is my weakness in writing, is I sometimes forget to close the gap because, as you know, I enjoy the absurdist digression.
Yes. Yeah.
So it really helps me keep the mechanism of the actual piece together, like the fundamentals of like, what am I trying to say? But I also rewrite it line by line. And that is where I find just the most tremendous joy. I cannot express to you like what that feels like for me. I think for normal people, there's other things they do that are really pleasant. But like for me, it's copying it into that doc, rewriting it line by line on the subway. Like that is the happiest I am. Because I get to take its like very businessy boy writing that I had to do as a younger person and turn it into like a Kokiism.
Well, so it's funny you say that because I actually do the same thing. I never, and Julie, you were saying the same thing too. Like, I never let it just have its wording in my draft ever. Because I do think there is such value in like, well, I wouldn't use that word. I would stretch this sentence out into 2 sentences, like whatever. Like there's a way that you speak that is very difficult to, I've tried to like program it into Claude or get it to do something, and it just like, as much as it wants to try to personalize to you, it always falls back on its sort of like B- level training data thing. And like you can't, that's why like you always have to remind it to take M dashes out. Like it just can't help itself. It has to revert back to the mean. So I think that's a really powerful example. Koki, what's the thing you like will never ever in a million years let AI do for you?
I usually don't let it come up with anything that I would classify as art.
Oh, interesting.
So like art for me can mean anything very tiny to something very large, but I don't let it have a place in the creation of something absurd or artistic in nature, like something where the primary function is that. So I think my last piece, I spent a lot of time talking about Fatboy Slim. It did not help me talk about Fatboy Slim.
No.
Like first of all, I love Fatboy Slim. Secondly, I was like really digging in because I was like, okay, this is the thing I'm trying to trigger. And the art of that piece was all about like, how do we reference a reference? And it's like, that's the story I decided to contain it in, is me being 6 years old and being like, why do I not live in South London? And why am I not at a club in Peckham right now, even though I'm 6? Like, why am I nostalgic for something I never experienced? These kinds of things that layer into our experience of the world. I can't let it do that, because it could never do that. Like, I talk a lot about, in that piece in particular, but every week I literally talk about the things the bot could never do, the things the bot cannot do. It could not have the feeling of like floating along in the Aegean and getting out of the water and realizing you can't remember where your mommy is. It can't, like, it cannot smell the sauteing of onions and celery at the end of every day in the house, right? Like, it doesn't have the same, like, smooth, like his grandmother's hands aren't smooth from like years and years of manipulating phyllo dough and creating things that are really yummy.
Sure.
Right? It doesn't have any of that. And that's how I layer myself back in. And I think that's what you're talking about, is like, how do we cannot let AI take the place of layering ourselves back into something that is passable and turning it into something that could be glorious.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. The other component for me that I've had to be very careful on is I get a lot of value out of doing the research myself, doing the reading, and
you do the math. I actually love that about your work. I can tell you did.
Well, and it's hard because it's like, well, I mean, but I think it goes to the point. I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think it goes to the point of like, there's something ineffable that just sort of seeps into it if you've actually done the work, and people can tell. And it's very subtle. It's hard to sort of pick out, but like, there's just this feeling of, yeah, I've done the reading. And it's very tempting to use AI to do the reading for you, but setting aside the fact that it hallucinates and makes mistakes and screws stuff up, even if it doesn't, it sort of robs you of the experience of like doing the reading yourself. And so I always warn.
I also love being a research girly, there's so much pleasure in discovery.
And you have to sort of like cultivate that in yourself, right? Because like I remember when I was in school, I always say this, like, AI would have been horrible for me, because I'm a constant taking shortcuts if I can find them person. And the only way I developed my good habits that I have is because I had to. I was forced to develop them in order to survive in the world and make a living. If I hadn't had that, I wouldn't have those tools. I'm not self-directed that way. And I do think there is a case to be made that, like, for a young marketer or copywriter, or if you want to get into content creation or whatever, like, do all of it yourself for a very long time and then slowly like layer AI in kind of one piece at a time. But you have to kind of find the parts, to your point, Koki, about like the rewriting it line by line. Like, if that's your superpower and that's what you enjoy, you can't let AI do that for you. You have to do it yourself, but you also have to spend some time figuring that out about yourself before that's something that is like personal to your workflow.
Totally. I think that's an interesting, like, I don't know that I had gotten to that framing of like, do the stuff yourself, but I really like it. And my team is about to be very mad at you.
As Koki takes away all of their AI tools.
They're going to be like, no. Yeah, there's going to be a mass revolt. You're going to find my head on a spike, and that's going to be worth it.
Well, I mean, at least we'll have done it for the content. All right, Julie, second question. Both of you worked and Julie, you were a co-founder of Fintech Today, which is a publication that, if you know anything about fintech, you know and read and were absorbed in a green and purple world for many, many years. Give me one story about something you learned kind of creating content for a newsletter, working with sponsors, that you've sort of carried forward into the work that you do today.
Don't be afraid to have opinions and write in your style. Because I had a very distinct style at Fintech Today. I started every single newsletter with like, "Hi friends," and then gave some like sort of personal anecdotes. And the trick was like, the people thought they were like friends with me reading it. And we were friends to a certain extent and stuff. So I liked having that. And you do that a lot in your newsletter too. So I think that was super important. And then the other hardest part was doing succinct. We would like on certain newsletters, not to deep dives and stuff, but like covering the news and just having like a couple lines and like, here's the opinion, and not being afraid for someone reading it and being like, well, I think that's different. Cause like, that's great. I love it that some people would disagree with it and have other opinions, because there's various ways to have different takes on things. So I would say the biggest thing is, don't be afraid to have more of a personal voice in it and have opinions, which B2B marketing needs to learn a little bit from as well.
Strenuously agree. Koki, how about you?
Exact same on the first point of like, I started everything in FinTech Today with, hey, y'all. And you did think you were friends with me. I also wrote in character. A lot of people don't know this about me. A lot of people thought that was me speaking, but I developed this character that I thought really worked for FinTech Today, which is like a Paris Hilton-esque version of somebody who knew a lot about FinTech, who was a little bit smarter than you, but knew how to boil it back. And like, also wasn't intimidating. Like the point was supposed to be a little ditzy. And I think a lot of people got like, so many people read the free newsletter every week. There was like a ton of readers. I don't even remember by the time we were done with that. I started getting recognized in public by random people, right? Like it was really weird. So
or if you wore like the FinTech Today hat or like sweater.
Which I never wore. I got recognized with a mask on once. I was like, damn, my hair must be iconic. But like, but like it started to happen towards the end. It was really weird, which is funny because it's FinTech, who cares?
Sure.
But there was this this element of creating this character, I think was really important for a younger version of me that was very scared to be wrong, which brings me to the next thing. Be wrong loudly and often. There is an immigrant child inside of me who was held to a very high standard and was expected to deliver perfect grades, perfect athletic record, perfect attendance, all the stuff, who hates being wrong and fears it above everything else. FinTech Today very much taught me that being wrong loudly and often is only a boon. It can only be good for you.
Yeah,
it helps you formulate. It helps you build that backbone. And for edification, today I actually do not write in character anymore.
So now you're
I got to break character.
Got to break character. Okay.
It's very interesting because now that I'm comfortable being wrong, I'm comfortable being me. And before I could be like, I could be wrong, but it was someone else. It was a character I built. It was an obfuscation.
I mean, that's a good piece of advice for people getting started because I think it's so intimidating to share your thoughts on a subject, especially when like one of the things that's scary about fintech is you might be smart and have a take on something, but like at best you're like a 200 level expert on a subject where you know there are 400 level experts reading it. And so it's like very intimidating, especially when you're getting started, to kind of trust your own take or instinct. So it's funny that you develop sort of a character to kind of like protect yourself a little bit at the beginning.
I was also like 26, right? Like I was scared.
Totally.
I was young and I was scared, and my editor was Julie, who was like also 26. And the two of us were like, I hope they like it, you know?
Yeah. Well, we liked it.
Your face is still 26 though, so it's okay.
Thank you, Dr. Dingra.
Yeah. Another shout out. All right. Final question. I'll let you both go. Give me one fintech company, ideally one that you don't work for, whose marketing you admire, and tell me why. Julie, you go first.
Even though Koki disagreed, I do think Stripe does a very good job, and it's just because you can tell they put a lot of effort into the things that they do. The tech blog I see referenced a lot. The Cheeky Pint podcast that they do, that like they built out a whole set for it, and that's doing a podcast right and
there
saying like I will commit to the 5,000 episodes. And then like Stripe Sessions, it's literally just one company doing a conference and people freaking like fly into it and everything.
I've never been, but I want to go. Yeah. I've heard really good things. Okay.
People literally are like out in the parking lot talking to folks and stuff. It's sort of like, a mini Money 2020 or FinTech NerdCon, just like at Stripe Sessions. It's crazy. Name another company that in FinTech that has that kind of presence and people willing, like literally thousands of people that want to fly in just to hear you talk about your new features and stuff.
Totally. Yep. That's a good one. Koki, how about you?
Not Stripe.
Sorry. We'll do another podcast on your hot take on Stripe being bad at marketing.
I have a series of hot takes on Stripe. I don't actually think they're bad at marketing. I think I'm done with them being the gold standard of marketing because we're really bad at copying and plagiarizing it.
That's a different take. I can agree with that.
Yeah, that doesn't mean they're bad. That just means
their own corner of the world they own very well and beautifully, and it's well executed. And then you have the like. Every company is purple. Every company with the exact same name. It drives me crazy.
Right.
Who do I like? Socure, obviously, for personal reasons that are just, I like my own work. Yeah, shocker. I also really like Spade. They're a data and AI platform. Basically, they do I think they do transaction grouping.
Yeah, transaction enrichment stuff. Yeah.
That's right.
They were a great podcast. post with me.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
shout out that too. But I really like how they visualize what they do. Like their new website is literally my favorite thing in the world. I look at it probably 3 times a week. I'm not kidding. I've told their founder Open on multiple different occasions that like their website is my favorite thing in the world, and I can't wait to do that but better at SoCure. And then I taunt him a bit.
There you go. Little competition.
But yeah, it's good for us. But first of all, the work's important, which is good. I think the work visually it's really important to be able to visualize that work. And free advice, Open, if you're listening, you should do a bunch of outbound marketing on the data that only you can see. So like, you're doing all this enrichment for Mercury. What are business banks what are business bank accounts actually spending on? Like, do these kind of reports, like, how everyone loves like the Pornhub data report? Do that, but for money.
A brilliant one of those recently was Ramp obviously sees how much people.
That too. I love Ramp.
On AI, and Anthropic just passed OpenAI. Like, that's a brilliant marketing tactic. Do a story on that. It's great.
Yeah. You have the data.
The data that
I also think Ramp is a good winner too. Like they do really good work. They are also very like output. You can tell that things are tied to revenue.
Maybe this is why they have to fundraise every 2 weeks, is because they're spending so much on their marketing.
I think there's
Alex
something
and I texted about that all week.
Yeah. I had a hot take on Ramp last week, and it was that they are exceptional at marketing, but it probably isn't cheap to fund all of that beautiful work. I mean, they do Super Bowl ads, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
So,
and then going back and forth with you on it, I went back and forth with Matt Goldman on it, because Matt Goldman's like my favorite person to complain about things with.
It's something. All right. That I will not take up any more of your time. As always, a delight. This is the first time I think both of you have been on the podcast. It will not be the last. Thank you so much for coming on. This was so
remember,
fun.
we only come on together. You can't have.
Yeah, we are one unit.
I now know the rules. I won't ever try to break them
go through our
again.
agent, please. It's very important to us.
I will do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. This is awesome.
Okay, up next on the podcast, we have Jessica Kendall, Head of Content and Communications at Spinwheel. I wanted to have Jessica on because I've known her for a long time. She's a friend of mine in the industry. And more importantly, she's one of the better B2B marketers and specifically content marketers that I know. So I wanted to have her come on to talk a little bit about messaging, content creation, the importance of editing, particularly in the age of AI, and why whimsy and fun really work when it comes to standing out from the crowd. So great conversation with Jessica, and that is up next. This episode is brought to you by Persona. Fraudsters test your defenses until they find an opening. Then they attack. That's why link analysis tools like Persona's Graph are so important. They let you find users who share attributes like IP addresses, device fingerprints, or any other signal that your risk team might want to define. From there, you can shut down entire fraud rings and add link analysis checks directly into onboarding, so repeat attacks and copycats don't get a second shot. Learn more about how link analysis works and what makes Persona's real-time graph unique at withpersona.com/FTT-fraud. Okay, well, it is a day for firsts, making her first Fintech Takes podcast appearance. My friend and frequent collaborator, Jessica Kendall. Jessica, great to see you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me here.
I am delighted to have you here. I feel like we chat all the time, but we've never recorded any of these chats. I know that you think very deeply about all things content creation, content marketing, B2B marketing, and have worked in this space forever. So I wanted to pick your brain on a couple of subjects. The first one is one that I haven't talked about yet on this episode, but is like, to me, kind of the root underneath all the other work that eventually gets done in this area, which is messaging. I find, and I'd be curious for your perspective on this, I find messaging to be one of those tasks that I think like people who haven't worked in content marketing before don't even like know as like a thing you do. Like it's not even like on the radar because it's not an output. You don't see it published anywhere, but you see its fingerprints on good content, on good marketing campaigns, because it's a distillation of like, who are we as a company? Why do we exist? Why do we do what we do? What problems are we obsessed with? how do we talk about that, and like creating sort of an internal consistency that is, again, kind of the underpinnings, I think, of all great content. The fact that this is work that most people don't know happens is a challenge. It's also work that like, and you have much more experience at this than I do, but I have worked on a few messaging projects. Everyone always has an opinion on. So just like trying to extract from people's brains, particularly when you're working at a fintech startup and it's like founders, executives who've worked at the company for a long time, like everyone has their own sort of internal story for how they think about and talk about the company, the product, why it exists. When they go to parties or they like are talking to their spouse's parents about what they do, like they have a way they describe it, but like harmonizing all of those, get everyone on board with it, and then creating like a messaging document or a messaging framework. We used to call it a messaging tree back in the day. Creating something like that that then can be the basis for all of the other B2B marketing and content work you want to do. It's shockingly hard. What's been your experience kind of trying to craft messaging, trying to update messaging? Like, give us a window into that work.
It's very timely that you asked me this now, because I joined Spinwheel 3 months ago, literally
That's why I
last
wanted
week.
to ask you. Yeah.
And so that's the first thing I do when I start in a new role. And my first week or two, all I did was just meet with people and say, okay, tell me how you explain Spinwheel.
Sure.
How does it work?
Yep.
And you kind of collect all the inputs. You get the 800 different elevator pitches floating around there. And I think the easiest thing to do first is what are the commonalities, and then what are those weird outliers, and figure out where the truth lies in between all of those. Because there's going to be some things that are no-brainers. Everybody says XYZ. You've got that. But then there's like weird anecdotal stories that pop up, customer case study examples, things like that, that kind of allow you to create some of that differentiation. Because it's not as easy as just, plop it in a chat GPT and then copy paste. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately.
No. Yeah.
Nor do you want it to work like that, because then everyone will sound the same. So I think you got to learn, you got to read, you got to see what's already out there. And then you're right. There's, 50 cooks in the kitchen, and every cook has a different recipe. And you're like, okay, no, today we're making cupcakes. This is how we're doing it.
Yeah.
And find a way to create that commonality. So I think first and foremost, you got to listen. You got to take the good with the bad and figure out how to translate it. And then I think the harder part is once you have figured out what that messaging is, getting everybody to sing from the same song sheet, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because people have habits. They've already been used to explaining it one way, or they don't know enough about one topic to be able to dive into it. So that internal training and I can't even say the word.
Now you've screwed me up
See?
too.
Nobody can say that word.
Operationalization. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. So getting everybody to use it, I think, is the even harder part. And it's iterative too. Like if you write your messaging and then never change it for years, it's going to get stale. It's going to get outdated. So all of my messaging docs are living, breathing. And I always tell people I reserve the right to change this at any point in time. And I will. Because as the company evolves, new products come out, industry trends change, you got to shift with it.
Well, and to that point, that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about messaging is I feel like everyone is sort of revamping their messaging, whether they're doing it in a formal way or not because of AI. So it's like we all need to have an answer for AI. We all need to explain why our company just so happens to be the one that's perfectly positioned to catch this AI wave and to drive the change that everyone thinks is going to happen in the industry and to, benefit for us and our customers to benefit from this change. And, AI is obviously the most dramatic example of this, but this happens frequently where it's like the sort of center of gravity of the company shifts and the messaging needs to move with it. But like maybe using AI as a case study, I mean, how do you think about positioning a company in the age of AI? Because everyone is telling this story. Like probably going back to your point about you can't just ask ChatGPT or Claude to do this. I would be willing to bet that one of the more frequent business queries that AI chatbots have been getting over the last couple of years has been, hey, how does my company make sense now that AI tools are here? And so everyone is kind of working on a revamp of their story to make sense in the year of our Lord 2026. How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's similar to what you saw, when digital became a thing and with mobile. I remember everybody putting, mobile first, mobile ready on their messaging, even if it wasn't really. I think AI is the same way. So if you see AI powered, AI enabled, you have to wonder, is it actually AI powered? I think retrofitting is the key word you said, because if you are just retrofitting to weave in AI, you're probably not actually using AI, and it's just trying to jump on the bandwagon. I think for us, fortunately, Spinwheel is very advanced on its use of AI. So for us, it was an easy conversation to talk about it. But for us, it was, how far do you go? How much do you share to show you're innovative without kind of giving away that secret sauce? I think that was the bigger challenge for us, is how do you draw the right line? And for companies who are just trying to be like, oh, we use AI, stop. Actually use AI first, and then weave it into your messaging. And I think the bigger question is, how is AI changing how that messaging is consumed? So for us, every AI model has its own methodology for where it pulls answers to prompts and queries. So how do you make sure you're showing up in those answers? That's kind of where I've been spending my time lately, and trying to build out the right framework to ensure that we're showing up where we should.
Well, and I think the core point with like showing up where we should, whether it's search engine optimization or now we have generative engine optimization, GEO. Thank God I got out of SEO when I did. Like, I feel like I avoided the challenges everyone else is going through now. But the root of doing that well, regardless of the interface that's used to find the information, is creating great content. And I wanted to get a sense from you on how you think about creating content that breaks through, because it does feel like when I started working in B2B marketing, I started very early in content creation. And it was actually great because almost no businesses were creating great content back then. And so you could start a blog and you could just sort of create good content that wasn't like extraordinary, but was just like kind of somewhat more personal, somewhat more interesting and well-researched than the average. And you could really stand out. You fast forward to today, content marketing is the strategy that everyone pursues to varying degrees. It's supercharged, of course, by the fact that we have AI that you can use to just spit out kind of C+, B- level content that's like good enough. And so it does feel a little bit like we've sort of flooded the zone with content. And as a result, like if you're going to do content marketing, and it feels like that's still a very valid and important part of the mix of what everyone should be doing, like you have to think a lot more about, how do I stand out in a sea of content and increasingly a sea of slop? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, first of all, if you use AI to support your writing, that's fine. But
Sure.
I think of AI as a really good unpaid intern. Use them for research, use them for first drafts, but check their work, and make sure you're being critical to what's coming out. So no problem with that. I use it myself to help come up with headline ideas or do some of the research behind topics that I'm not as smart on. But to create content that actually stands out and that gets picked up by AI, you have to still have that original thought. Like I always tell people who are like, I want to be a thought leader. It's like, okay, to be a thought leader, you have to have a thought first, and then that's how you can be a thought leader. So, I mean, you know this about me. I love research and unique data insights. Those are always going to stand out from the noise because no one else can access that same data and provide those insights. So an AI loves to reference that kind of research when it's pulling answers to queries. It gives you that authority, that relevance. So I'm always going to turn to research first if that's an option. And then back to my joke about, if you want to be a thought leader, you have to have a thought. Same thing with great content. It has to have some kind of thought. If you're just regurgitating something or recapping something without putting your own unique lens on it, it's just going to fall into that slop bucket and not going to stand out at all. And then I would say the last thing is, if you're bored by it, other people are probably bored by it too. So write things that you yourself find interesting, and that your audience will find interesting, not just what you think you have to write about.
To put a +1 on that last point you made, I am constantly blown away by the ability for people when they consume content to pick up on very subtle cues that indicate your level of passion about a topic. And it's really hard to feign. I don't know why that is, but like every time I've tried to write like the next viral piece on agentic commerce or whatever the topic du jour is at the moment, um, it fails. It falls flat. And I try really hard, right? I'm like, I'm gonna be a part of this conversation. Like that's just not for Simon Taylor. That's for me too. I'm gonna get in this and I'm gonna like be a thought leader in this particular area. And, I'm not really actually that interested in the topic. I don't really care. I can fake a lot of the research and the effort with AI or with other things, but there's just some subtle thing, these subtle markers that end up in the content where people are reading it and they're like, you don't care about this. And then by contrast, I will write about stuff, and I'm sure you've had this experience too, where it's like, boy, this is pretty niche. Like there might only be like 12 people in the world who care about this the way I care about it, but I'm one of them and I'm going to write about it. And some of those pieces will really, really resonate and just get a great response because people who you thought didn't care about it or who didn't care about it before they read your piece on it, pick it up and they're like, wow, I'm not sure I get it. And I'm not sure I understand why it's important. But immediately the first paragraph, I can tell this person who wrote it cares about this. And like, that's something you can't get if you just use AI without doing your own work on top of it. And it's not something you can get if you create the content with the intent of chasing after trends or chasing after what you perceive as being popular.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And like, there has to be some personality in it. My favorite posts that you write are the ones where you've got your basketball reference, or I think your last one, you learned about the term elbow grease from your wife. Like those little anecdotes make it feel real.
Yeah.
AI would never pull that in.
No.
So it's got to have personality. You have to find it interesting yourself, and you've got to have that unique hook.
Yeah, I think all of those are exactly right. The other element to this, and thankfully I don't have to do this as much, but I know you do a lot, which is, content marketing is an investment, right? I mean, like it's either you doing the work yourself. Obviously, AI can help us go faster, but like it can't do everything, at least not well by itself. You can work with other parties, right? I mean, I know you do a lot of work with like other executives inside the company trying to like extract good ideas and thoughts. A lot of the thought leaders are just sitting there with great thoughts, but they never lead with them. They never share them. So like, turning people into content creators inside of a company, that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. We've been fortunate enough to work together during my time at Fintech Takes, partnering on great content. But in all of those cases, it's an investment. And as a marketer who has a budget, you have to show a return on that investment. I'm fascinated by that challenge because, I hear anecdotally all the time, like, oh, I forwarded this to this person, or, hey, I read this and it really changed the way I think about this. So like, I'll get little kind of kernels of anecdotal information that suggest that it's having an effect. But if you asked me like, how did this actually meaningfully change the buying behavior of this organization? I don't know that I know the answer to that, at least in a totally quantifiable way. How do you think about that challenge?
Yeah, I think that's the age-old question and will always be a challenge because there are some things that are clearly you can get attribution for. How many people opened the email, how many people clicked on the thing, filled out the form, that kind of stuff. But I think the anecdotal things like, oh, I forwarded it to this guy and he talked to this guy is much harder to measure. So content tends to sit kind of in the middle of those two worlds. Some of it's very actionable and measurable. Did anyone go to the website? How many, page views did we get? Things like that. But did anyone actually comprehend what we wrote and then leverage it and use it is much harder.
Did it change the way anyone thinks? Is like a really hard question to answer.
It's really hard. And I think we're continually getting better at being able to capture some of that. But some of it will always be this kind of nebulous thing. Did it work? I had an old manager several jobs ago that was like, hey, how do you know if your content is good? And I was like, that is a really hard question to answer.
What a personal question you ask. Yeah.
It's spelled right, number one. So
Right.
check.
Right.
Is it good? I don't know. That's so subjective. I think it's good, but someone else might think it's terrible because it's not their style. So it's definitely, how do you blend that art and science to say, is something good or not? So for us, I think when I'm making an investment in partnerships or content or whatever that has a dollar associated to it, it's also thinking about, is the juice worth the squeeze? Are there ways that I can take this and repurpose it in other formats to stretch that value even further? So it's taking a piece of content and turning it into multiple, and finding other ways to point people to it that have metrics associated with them, I think is the key.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I always sort of think about it as like, there's kind of two marketing brains, right? One is like, how do I sort of account for every dollar I spend? How do I think in terms of programs and reach and impact and what we can measure and improve? And then the other marketing brain, which is also important, and they kind of work synergistically when they work well, is like, my job is just to throw as much value out into the market as possible and trust that it'll sort of come back to us over time. And so I do think that art science mix is a really important one because, I mean, to your point about good, like, I don't know if anyone else is going to think this good. The only way I can like justify it to myself is like, I'm proud of this. I think we did really good work here. And we'll just have to kind of trust that, like, putting that out, and then to your point, being smart about how we repurpose it, how we build it into campaigns, like how we utilize it is the other component to it. The other flip side to content marketing is event marketing, which obviously like content features very prominently in. You are one of the sharper people I know as it relates to content at events. So I wanted to ask you this question. Jessica, Kendall, why does most content at industry events suck so badly? And like, what can be done to make it better? Because I probably have contributed my share of bad content at events over the years. I've certainly seen a lot of it. I've worked with many, many event organizers on content, including yourself, by the way, in previous roles. And it's funny because I think everyone always wants the content to be good, but it sort of ends up getting like sort of pulled off course by other incentives or sort of structural challenges. What's been your observation about sort of in a IRL context, bringing great content to life?
Yeah. I think the reason why some content isn't great at events, to me, it comes down to three things.
Okay.
One, the company putting on the event is pushing their own agenda and not actually catering to the audience at hand.
Mm-hmm.
So they're creating content for themselves and not their audience.
Yep.
And that gets old real fast.
Yep. Like we have a 3-hour long session on how great all of our products are. Are you ready? It's like, no, I don't want that.
No, nobody wants to go to that, including the people at the company.
Totally.
Sponsors. A lot of events are pay for play these days. And so whoever's got the biggest checkbook gets to pick the topic. And sometimes it's not a great topic and it's not a good fit for the audience. So I think when you have sponsors for events, it needs to be a partnership with them to help them create content that people will actually enjoy. Because it's a win-win for both of you. You have a better event, they get better attendance at their session. And then I think not taking the time to prep speakers accordingly. I'm always amazed when there's no prep call for an event. And I'm like, wait, but how do we know what we're going to talk about? And how do we get the right vibe? And so I think taking the time and putting in the energy to help the speakers understand who they're speaking to and help them formulate the right structure for their content can go a long way as well. So I think to me, those are the three things that kind of derail content at events. And then just over programming. When there's 8,000 sessions to go to and you also want to network and you also want to go to the booths and you also want to eat lunch and sit down for 5 minutes, it's really hard to just consume all of that content. And so you end up ignoring most of it.
Oh yeah. No, it's funny. I learned that lesson the hard way actually, because we were doing a Fintech Takes event, and I was so nervous about basically giving anyone any unscheduled time. I was like, in my head, I was almost doing it the way I think about like my toddlers, where I'm like, they have to be scheduled 100% of the time or they'll go crazy and they'll tear my house apart and it'll be a disaster. And so I'm like thinking like, okay, they're going to go from this and then we'll give them a 15-minute break, but then we'll be right back into content, blah, blah, blah. And one of the best suggestions I got from my team was like, they're like, this is all great, but remove like 40% of it and just let it breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Like just give it room, let it breathe, kind of trust the people who are there to like kind of wander into organic conversations with each other and find weird little kind of side quests and things to do. And that turned out to be amazing advice, because I do think you're right. Like we tend to overschedule things so much out of a sincere desire to like give people as much good content as possible. But you also have to remember, and I even remembered this when I was a teacher, like you have to let it breathe. You have like, these are human beings on the other side of it. They're not just like LLMs that you're throwing content into in order to train the next version of a model. Like these are people who need time to think and process and walk outside and see the sun and talk to each other. And so I think that's a huge component of it. Jessica, before I let you go, can I do a quick lightning round with you?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. First question. You are, among your many gifts, a very, very good editor, which is a different skill set than a writer, although you're also an excellent writer. I think editing is like one of those things that unless you've really spent dedicated time on it, you don't realize how hard it is to do well. And in particular, going to your analogy of like AI, if you've ever had interns working for you, like you'll want to kill yourself editing their work. Like you're just like, oh my God, like I could have written this 20 times and each one of them would have been better than the time it took me to edit this once and to try to fix it and give feedback. What's one piece of advice you would give to people who want to level up their editing abilities, particularly in this age of AI where we're all kind of editors now?
Look for too much repetition and really long sentences.
Okay.
If you fix that, it'll fix a lot of things in your content.
Okay. I like it. I will say many of the pieces I've written that I've been most proud of were edited at one point by Jessica Kendall. So I appreciate your editing work. All right. Question number 2. Your personal content and influencer strategy on LinkedIn seems to rely a lot on having a purse that is somehow related to the place that you are going, and then taking a picture of that purse, beautifully sort of backgrounded with like a kind of a foreground and a background. Can you explain how you landed on this LinkedIn influencer content strategy?
Absolutely. So I was actually playing around with serious content and fun content on LinkedIn to see what performed better.
Okay.
And if you guys go back through my LinkedIn like 2 months ago, you'll see a picture of a squirrel, because I have a whole bunch of squirrels who live in my backyard. And that dang squirrel got 10x more impressions, views, whatever metric you want, than anything else I'd posted in like months. And so I was like, okay, bring it. The fun content is working. And for those who know me well, I have an extensive purse collection. And so one of my friends was joking, why don't you just do like a series on your purses? And I said, why not? So that's what I've been trying. I've been doing it for like a month and a half now. Every Friday, it's pause for a purse.
Yes.
And because I have so many, it's very easy to connect it to wherever I am or whatever I'm doing that week. So it's been fun. It's been really fun. And it's still outperforming all of my business related content.
Yep. I can, again, +1 that answer by saying that when I do silly things through the newsletter, I'm shocked at how well they perform. And I'm
People
like,
love
literally,
it.
like, I'm just taking a break because I can't do serious fintech analyst work all the time. And so I'm just going to rank fintech logos or compare fintech companies to NBA players or whatever the thing is that week. And people go crazy for it. So don't underestimate fun is, I think, a good lesson.
Exactly. Embrace the weird. It performs well.
Embrace the weird, embrace the whimsy. And then Jessica, speaking of MBA, before I let you go, Game 4 is tonight. San Antonio Spurs, your hometown team against the evil New York Knicks. I'm not going to ask you to like tempt the basketball gods, but just I want to check in. How are you feeling right now?
It's a tough series.
It
All three
is.
games have been very close.
Yes.
Spurs have come out strong in all three games, and the first two just unfortunately weren't able to bring it home. But the last game, they figured something out. So I think
so too.
if they continue that trajectory, tonight will be interesting. I know the stat is no one has ever won with 2-0
Losing
two
the
losses
first two
at home to start this. Yeah. So, but there's a first time for everything.
They used to say no one came back from 3-1, and then the Cavs did it. Like it happens. These things happen.
I am hopeful, but also realistic. It's a very young team.
It is.
The Spurs are great, but they are super young. So if not this year, even though I hope they do it, then expect us to be back.
I would rate that answer as being a very low offense to the basketball gods. I think you played that very safe. I don't think you caused any karma issues at all. I will say for my own self, I am rooting for the Spurs, if for no other reason than for a nice long series, but also because we're friends and I know that they're your team. So go Spurs. Jessica, Kendall, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex, for having me. And go Spurs, go.
Okay. Well, last but not least for today's podcast, we have a quick conversation with the co-founder and CEO of Workweek, Adam Ryan. I am asked constantly how I create so much great content, and the answer is a company that you may or may not know, but who is my employer, Workweek, which is a B2B media company that the Fintech Takes network, the Fintech Takes newsletter, the Fintech Takes podcast are all built on top of and enabled by. Same thing for Fintech Takes Banking and my colleague Kia. We work for Workweek, so we work for Adam. As you'll hear in this discussion, Adam is incredibly thoughtful about all things relating to basically how we make B2B media better and how we make B2B marketers' lives easier. So we talk a little bit about the challenge of creating authoritative content in B2B. We talk about how measurement has been the bane of B2B marketers' existence for a long time. And we plug some new stuff that Workweek is doing that I hope any B2B marketers who are listening to this episode definitely take advantage of. So here is the final segment of the podcast with Adam Ryan of Workweek. Okay, making his inaugural Fintech Takes podcast debut, Adam Ryan. Thanks for coming on.
Long time, first time. Listened to the podcast just about every single one, maybe for the last 3 years, including all the offshoots. So I'm happy to be on, Alex.
Well, now I feel bad that I've subjected you to so much fintech content. It's funny. I think that most folks listening, I would venture to guess, probably don't know what a work week is, which is an experience that I have a lot when I am describing what I do and how I do it. And of course, that's by design. So maybe as a little bit of context, explain kind of the premise of Workweek, the whole kind of people follow people aspect and how that differs from sort of your average B2B media company.
Yeah. 4 years ago, a little bit more than, we saw that in consumer media, creators were doing really well with beauty and fashion and a bunch of other categories that, it's nice on TikTok, but in B2B, we think people also follow people, but there was no Kylie Jenner of fintech until Alex Johnson.
No. If I had the beauty and fashion sense and beautiful skin, that would be a good analogy.
As a longtime watcher, the haircut is just fantastic. But
thank you.
And so this trend around people follow people in B2B was something that just wasn't being focused on enough. So a lot of the platforms and media companies weren't building the right tooling and support, we believed, for creators like yourself to do this more full time and to really start to get their insights and experience out there in the world. And so that's what we focused on. And today, that the way that shows up is that we have 5 different some of the largest networks out there that really look like communities. So Fintech Takes Network is one of them, of course, and get to work with people like yourself day in, day out.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it's one of those models that is really interesting because when people are like, I don't know Workweek, what is Workweek? I'm like, exactly, yes, it's working. This is fantastic, and so the it's fun to give people a little bit of a peek behind the curtain in terms of like how operationally we do everything that we do here, and it's interesting because the theme of this episode and the previous segments we've had in this episode are all about basically why B2B marketing is terrible and how it can be better. And I mean, I know have worked in and around B2B marketing and sales for a long time. I've worked in B2B marketing. I mean, one of the things that, and this kind of goes to the core premise you were just describing, that's always sort of been a challenge is there's this huge gap between like how people who actually know how this industry work talk and think and solve problems, and then what you see when you look at a sales deck or a PowerPoint presentation or a webinar or read a blog post. Like there's just this like chasm between those two things. And so, what I've always noticed with like operators or, B2B like buyers in financial services is they'll sort of like wade through all of the sort of like, it's a disservice to call some of that stuff even 100 level content. Like, and then they'll finally like find someone at the company they can talk to and they can talk shop with and like exchange messages. But that's like 6 months into the sales cycle by the time you get down to that level and find someone who knows what they're talking about. And it feels like one of the big changes that Workweek is starting to catalyze and that will continue hopefully to spread and become more common is like dragging that expertise and that operator perspective up to the top of the funnel and kind of closing that gap. I know you spend a lot of time thinking about that gap. Can you talk a little bit about like that, what that is and why it's so hard to close?
Yeah, there's two kind of like, I think, direct causes. One, really great practitioners that know what they're talking about have not had the opportunity to create enough content and make that mainstream. And I think that's the number one is like when the marketing teams are responsible for the vast majority of the content that's out there in an industry, it's going to be simplified down because
it just has to be.
It has to be. And instead, I think flipping the narrative where having practitioners start to create more content, I like to use it like you don't have to explain an acronym. Like you can like go through the motions and like your audience knows what you're talking about or things.
It's funny you say that because I realized I only ever use the acronym. I never spell it out. And partially it's because I want to signal to people like, look, I know, so let's just not even waste column inches on that.
That's how it should be. And I think that's how you move up this market though of people actually starting to use the language that matters and not just kind of marketing fluff. And so that's one. And then the other one is that there's this complexity of buying, particularly if you have a product that is many months or even years long to sell. You typically have so many stakeholders that it's like the telephone game, and like by the end, it's just like, "Hi, we fintech, we sell this thing," and it's like and it's like no, it's and there's so much more there, but it gets lost in the game. And I think that's the opportunity to kind of up level, I think, the industry is how do we have better marketing more consistently and then better voices that know how to actually talk about it in the way that the customers do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One, and on this podcast, I talk to folks who have worked in these roles and have actually partnered with Fintech Takes in some cases. But can you talk a little bit about like within the universe of companies that are trying to reach these very sort of senior buyers, of all the companies that are trying to do that, like I think over the last 3 years, we found kind of a subset who really understand kind of like Workweek's model and like how we're trying to sort of help in the ways that you're describing. What do those companies, in your experience, because you sit a lot on the sales side and see sort of those interactions, what do those companies have in common in terms of like what they're looking for or how they're thinking about B2B marketing differently than your average company?
I'd say they're self-aware.
Sure.
And meaning one of the things that happens in B2B is that because it's slightly more complicated, you're not selling, eyeliner or a pair of jeans where everyone kind of understands it. When you add complexity, all of a sudden everyone stops thinking and acting like a human.
Yeah,
and
that's been a theme in this episode, actually. Yeah,
and that's this lack of self-awareness of like, do you actually talk like that? Do you actually like want to communicate? Would you buy that way? So I think the people that we've been able to work with are really self-aware that like to reach our customers in the ways that you want to do it, we need to market and sell in the way that we believe we would do it. And most of those folks would be like, well, I would love to have people like Alex and other trusted voices in the space help have our messaging in the tone and the trust and the voice that he has, because that's what influences me. And I think that's something that a lot of the partners that we work with have. And I think, kind of your point about Workweek, we purposely stay out of the limelight on the community forefront and the creator forefront. It's not our lane to necessarily be known there, but we build our brand for B2B marketers in fintech, et cetera. And so that's a lot of the conversations that we have with them is, let's start acting like a human and start using voices that are trusted like you would do any other way.
So, I mean, that's a good way of describing sort of who the Workweek model in the early years sort of selected for, was people who kind of naturally thought this way. And, it's interesting because having sat in that chair on that side of it and like written a check for, doing these types of engagements or partnerships, it's funny. I sort of joke sometimes about like the two brains that content marketers have, right? Where it's like the one brain is, okay, I know that my job is to just create good things in partnership with awesome people, to put those out into the market and not expect anything in return and just add value all the time. And over time, if we add enough value, that will accrue back to our brand. We'll have a good reputation. It'll help us recruit better people. It'll make sales cycles shorter, better. We'll be able to preempt sales cycles entirely. It'll feed into our own marketing and the work we do to tell our story. Like, it'll all just compound in a really valuable way. But it's going to happen over a long period of time. It's going to be quite an investment, both internally as well as like our budget for working with third parties and partners. And this is the crucial thing that gets to the second brain that marketers have. It historically has been really hard to measure.
Correct.
And, the thing that's funny is, and I sometimes joke that like, like Meta kind of ruined marketers' lives for a little bit there, because it was like, for a second, it was so easy to measure a certain type of marketing spend that it sort of like was like, well, we should have the same type of reporting on everything. But of course, the infrastructure to do that wasn't available everywhere at all times. And, I feel for a lot of the partners that we work with where they're like, I know this is the right thing to do, but my life would just be 1,000 times easier if I could also prove that this is the right thing to do. I know you obsess over this problem. Talk a little bit about that, and maybe talk a little bit about a solution we might have to this that is sort of innovative and unique.
I appreciate you bringing this up, because one of the stats that stands out when we talk with B2B marketers, it's the average tenure for an executive B2B marketer is 18 months. And one of my questions to follow up that is like, how long is your sales cycle? And most of them don't even last a full sales cycle. And so to your point of like making the right decisions and doing the thing that they believe will work, they don't have time to, more or less, can they show it in the short term? They're not even going to be tenured long enough on average to prove it. And so this is not new. And, to your point around Meta's had huge success because with, all the Shopify boom, those two things grew together, because the sales cycle of a consumer product is a click away, and then you can prove it and it's great. Banking and fintech products don't exactly align to that same cycle.
Can't sell them on Shopify as much as I wish you could. Yeah.
Not exactly a clickbait headline away from winning. So the issue is what you're trying to do during that process is educate your customer, not just about what feature it is, but what problems they have. Sometimes they don't even understand, especially in a regulated market, of what's changing. And for a content marketer, that is like what your job is to start to move that customer down the journey of, once they finally do reach out, your sales team doesn't have to explain the problem, sell it. They're already there. And that journey, I kind of call it the hidden sales cycle. It's like before it ever shows up in Salesforce, in your CRM of like where they're marketing in, there was no way to really show those those touch points besides potentially like a page view visit on your blog, which, we all know that's like not necessarily the most common way that people consume content all the time. And what we wanted to do was recognize that newsletters like yours are some of the most popular ways for these buyers to actually understand what's going on, what they should be doing. And within those ads, you cite off on 100 to 150 word ad every single Fintech Takes. And it's through your voice, it's through your lens. You give feedback to make sure that, to your point, it's in the language. And at the end of that, we think when someone reads that ad, whether they clicked or not, they moved one step closer to that process. That hidden sales cycle is now beginning. And the solution we came up with was to be able to start to show that. So today, if a B2B marketer wants to sponsor your newsletter, what we've been able to do is create an identity graph. As someone opens that newsletter, reads that ad, we can send that signal to their CRM on the account level. And then if someone clicks that ad, we can send that signal as well to their CRM. And so what's happening, the outcome of that, the last 18 months we've been trying, kind of testing it in beta, is that sales is taking sometimes 3 or 4 times more credit than they deserve compared to the marketer. And I think if we flip that, I don't think that marketer is going to get fired at 18 months. And I think they start to actually be able to prove the value of the decisions that they've been making. And that's really what we've been focused on building with our partner platform.
Yeah, it's hugely powerful because, and you and I joke about this a lot, just via text sometimes, where it's like, I'll share this sort of anecdote that I hear, right? Because you hear things, right? Like in the industry, it's a small industry. And so will say, oh yeah, I forwarded this to this person. And then that'll get back to the partner that worked with us on this thing. And oh, we got great feedback, or someone called us out of the blue because they read this thing. And so like anecdotally, I would know that these things were happening, but like the anecdote is like half of 1% of the like influence or reach it actually has. And like the anecdote is the only thing that I, and more importantly, the B2B marketer that we were working with, would have to go on like the impact of it. And so like being able to show the actual like reach and influence in a measurable way, I mean, not only does it make B2B marketers' lives easier, which I think is great, but I think it also, and this kind of goes to your point about the hidden sales cycle, it kind of illuminates like how your buyers behave. I think in a way that is like very unusual. I mean, I remember when I worked in B2B marketing full time, like that was the thing we were constantly kind of puzzling over, is like, we know this thing exists once there's an RFP, but we also know that they didn't create the RFP from scratch, just sitting down. This is pre-AI, kids. So like there was no Claude to help you design an RFP. And so like they had to do research. They had to like talk to people. They had to go to conferences. They had to make calls. They had to share information with peers in the market. Like information was being exchanged and learning was happening. And we felt once we ramped up our B2B marketing efforts that we were contributing to that and hopefully shaping it in a way that was useful to us. And again, occasionally, anecdotally, we would see things like, my favorite was when you'd see a very unique way that we phrased some idea in the market, and then that would show up in the wording of a question in an RFP. And it's like, okay, there we are. There's our fingerprints. I can see us there. But again, that was like one little anecdotal sliver of evidence that we were having an impact. It couldn't like graph the whole thing.
No. And some of the people that we've worked with for years, like their instincts are so right. They're like, I know it works. Mm-hmm. I can't prove it though. Like,
right,
and then,
right.
And this is, I think to your point, it's a little bit of product marketing, like understanding the journey. So many CMOs that we meet with and talk with, they meet with their board, and the board's like, well, pull up your Salesforce. What's the sales cycle? And Salesforce says, 90 days. And everyone in the room's like, no one makes this decision in 90 days. It started way before then. And so this is that issue. And now, what we want to be able to do is send way more signals to that CRM, where that marketer now actually has an understanding on the account level, like, hey, this person has started this. And over time, when you can map that towards what that buying journey looks like, you will start to see your win rate increasing potentially, or your sales cycle decreasing. And that's kind of the results that we're having. And I think the flip side of it too is it's a wonderful thing for marketers to be able to start to recognize the creators that they want to work with that have the best and kind of best influence and most trust. It there's no hiding. And I think that's, we've always kind of taken an approach of be as honest as we possibly can. And in advertising, that's not always the case. And with, what this does is we always believe that there's been hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue influence from your newsletter. And now we'll be able to show that. And I think that's the opportunity for B2B marketing in the future is how do we start to really prove that hidden sales cycle and the content that lives there.
Yeah, well, and I think the other point you're kind of hitting on that's important to call out is, and I say this constantly, and people are sort of surprised sometimes when I say it, especially if you're like newer to the industry, it's not that big an industry, right? And so I think the other thing that I run into a lot with this is, well, how many people are on the subscriber list? How many people are coming to the event? How many people are doing X, Y, or Z? And that's understandable because that's how we are trained to think. But it's not really the right question because the number of people who make these decisions, it's a very, very small group. And so the question should be who subscribes, who is coming to the newsletter, who engages with the content, who forwards it to someone else. Like the who matters a lot more than like how big the audience is. And I guess, and I know you think about this a lot, like in the age of AI, I think that's just going to become magnified, right? Like
100%.
Like scale is going to be so easy to achieve in terms of creating content, publishing content, building a list that has 150,000 names on it, but you don't know like the actual impact it's having, and the actual industry isn't getting any bigger. It's just the sort of shadow sort of like replica of the industry that we sort of see from a marketing lens gets bigger and faster because of AI, but the actual thing is still the same size. And so I feel like the need to focus on that who and that core of the industry that makes these decisions is just going to become more important.
And the people that create content for that group, this rewards that behavior. And I think it was something that, we've always talked about with all the creators with Workweek is like, it's okay to create content that appeals to a small group of people.
Right.
And because we've always kind of emphasized this who, and it's really easy to create kind of viral content that appeals to everyone and it feels gratifying. And that's how the system was made. And, if you're a marketer, the benchmarks and newsletters have always been, well, how big's the list? What's the open rate and what's the click-through rate? And all three of those metrics are not actually tangible in B2B advertising. They're not helpful when you're thinking about who your customer is. And so that's the change that we're making. We're educating our customers on that. And it's a change. And it's a total change, but marketers understand. They're excited, I think, to actually have an opportunity to do it. And for creators, I hope it changes this, kind of flips the script of this reward system where like, oh, I have to like kind of dumb things down because I get the most feedback. And it's like, hey, actually, when you don't explain the acronym, sometimes it works a lot better.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I mean, just from a creator perspective, creating content that like hits with that small group of people, there's nothing more satisfying in the world than that. So it's like kind of like there's like the cheap form of dopamine, which is like hacking Twitter or LinkedIn and getting a bunch of viral things. And then there's like the deeper form of dopamine where it's like someone you respect and are maybe a little afraid of, quite frankly, reads a thing and writes back. And you see, like, I've had this experience multiple times where you get the email in your inbox and it's like from this person. And you're like, oh my God, like I'm like nervous that I have this email in my inbox. And then you open, and they're like, I really liked this, or I thought this was interesting, but I disagreed here, but here's why. And they're like engaging with you in a substantial way, like cultivating that sort of back and forth and that sort of connectivity in the industry. It's what all good creators want to do. But to your point, the infrastructure surrounding all of this, which governs the incentives under which we're all paid and how we make money and how we help the partners we work with make money, like that has to work too, or we can't do that. We can't incentivize that. So I'm very excited that infrastructure is finally being built. I guess the last thing, Adam, I mean, you're a sales guy, so let me give you a pitch for you to sell something. You talked about sort of catalyzing this change in the industry and wanting people to sort of start to talk this way more and think this way more. We're going to be doing this in person with folks later this year. in Austin, Texas in late August, which is where the sales job comes in for you because, might be a little hot, but it also will be very exciting.
You could balance it with your Montana trip later that, is...
I have plenty of cold. I need the desert a little bit.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit about upfronts.
Yeah, upfronts is, so one, I think, one of the reasons at the core of what Workweek wanted to do was that B2B has always leaned more boring than bold, and that with content that we've talked about. But also, in consumer media, there are upfronts events, and they've happened for a half century, and they're a huge party and a lot of good content. And there's never been that for B2B marketing. And so 3 years ago, we did the first ever upfronts event. This year, August 26th and 27th, we will have our third one. The reason to come is because we are in this ever-changing cycle of how people are consuming content through creators, newsletters, but there's this new shift, as we talked about here, with how to actually prove that the decisions you're making are working. And we're going to be diving into that. We're going to be talking about different ways and trends of 2027 of how to handle what's coming and have the opportunity to meet people like yourself on a one-on-one basis. And so, if you're a B2B marketer leading any sort of fintech company or bank, we'd love to have you down and kind of talk about what the future of B2B marketing looks like.
It'll be a lot of fun. We've done it. This will be our third one. The first two were super fun. I mean, there's something very different actually about being able to get practitioners who work on this stuff together and just seeing them sort of like exchange ideas, being able to do it in a fun setting. Really would highly recommend it. We will drop a link for folks to apply if you're interested in attending the Workweek upfronts. We'll also drop a link so you can learn more information about the Workweek partner platform that Adam described. Adam, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Alex, one of my favorite people to read and watch, and was awesome to be on, and can't wait to see it in August in Austin.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Fintech Takes. Stay up to date with emerging companies and the latest fintech trends by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. And if you love Fintech Takes, please tell a friend.